Why don't we get started, because we have such a full agenda. I know people will continue to join us, but welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the July Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice Community Advocacy Network call, otherwise known as CTIPP CAN. Only a lawyer would come up with a title that long. But thank you for joining us, and more importantly, thank you for all the work you do every day at the local level, at the state level, at the national level to try and make America a trauma-informed country. It's a movement that I think we all are deeply passionate about, and it's really as a result of the work you do that the movement is building and building. Going back a little over a year, last April, CTIPP sent a letter to Congress saying that we know you need to deal with the pandemic, but you also need to start implementing programs, funding programs to deal with the second pandemic that is going to follow the first one caused by the trauma that the pandemic is going to produce. And it's going to produce all of the kinds of problems that we know trauma causes. Unfortunately, Congress didn't take our advice, and now the papers are just full of news, because most people don't read papers anymore, are full of articles about a second pandemic, about the explosion in opioid deaths, and the explosion in gun violence, the explosion in youth suicides, all of the things that we know are caused by trauma. So that's the bad news. Fortunately, there are funding sources and there are programs available today to help deal with the second pandemic. And that's really what this CTIPP CAN call is about. We're going to talk about funding resources that you could tap, like the Rescue Act, like the forthcoming opioid settlement, that can be used to address trauma. We're going to talk about legislation that's been introduced in Congress that would provide resources and programs to address the second pandemic. And then we're going to have two phenomenal presenters talking about the work they've done in their communities to really put trauma science to work. Sanghoon Yoo working in the faith-based community in Arizona, and Rebecca Lewis Pankrat working in very cool Kansas on helping people use trauma-informed approaches to move out of poverty. So we have a very full agenda and a very relevant agenda to today's crisis of a second pandemic. For those of you who are new, my name is Dan Press. I'm the General Counsel of CTIPP. And I'm now going to turn it over to my co-host, Jesse Kohler, who's the Executive Director of CTIPP, to introduce our first presenter. Jesse?
Thanks, Dan. My more formal title is Dan's right-hand man, and I couldn't be prouder for that. But very quickly, because of our full agenda, I would like to turn the table over to Jen Kurt, who is a legislative assistant in Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley's office, to discuss the Strong Support for Children's Act. So Jen, please take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen. I am a policy advisor for Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. I'm going to start because I am a visual learner, and so if anyone else is as well, I'm going to put a couple links in the chat. One is for a summary of the bill that I'm going to just give an overview at the request of CTIPP. And then the other is a letter that the Congresswoman wrote to President Biden all around actions he can take to have a trauma-informed administration, some of the initial actions. And then an op-ed she wrote, sort of a love letter to her constituents and anyone who's doing the labor of addressing trauma, just to talk about the trauma of the COVID-19 pandemic and how, you know, it's certainly, while we may be resuming some of our activities, are going back to work, being able to convene with loved ones, the trauma of the isolation, of the insecurity, of the loss of the last, year and a half and ongoing it lives in our bodies, and it will need to be treated. So as I mentioned, I work for Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, she is the Congress member from Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, which includes Boston and the greater Boston area. I know some of you are familiar with her and have actually worked with us before on, this bill and some other initiatives, so appreciate that. But on the Boston City Council, she started her work around, what she would call legislating healing. She founded the first task force on the Boston City Council to deal with trauma and convened a number of hearings to start the conversation at a time when people weren't really talking about the T word. And then when she came to Congress, she convened the first ever congressional hearing on childhood trauma. And that was with our then and forever chairman, Elijah Cummings of the Oversight Committee. And then from, what we found and what we heard from witnesses, at that hearing was born the Strong Support for Children Act. So the first link that I put in the chat was to the one-page summary. And essentially what this bill would do, there's a number of exciting pieces, and if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer them as well, because I don't know if I can get to all of it. And also I'm a bit of a nerd, and so I will try and give you a shorter summary, but there are some really exciting pieces in here. But essentially, one of the things that we found and we learned was that local public health departments don't have the resources that they need often to provide services tailored to local needs. And so, there are issues such as care coordination. There are people who are eligible for existing programs that are not receiving them because there isn't the necessary outreach resources. And then there are, locality specific contributors to childhood trauma that need tailored approaches. So one of the pieces of this bill is to provide funding to do that data analysis to identify what are the leading causes of childhood trauma. And it's not necessarily just domestic violence, it goes deeper than that. It's about poverty, it's about inequality, it's about homelessness, food insecurity. So giving public health departments the flexibility and funding from the federal government that they need to be able to address those root causes that often lead to some of the acute issues that cause acute trauma, as well as the more lasting forms of trauma. And then in addition to that, care coordination grants to help local public health departments hire care coordinators, case managers, community health workers, infant mental health specialists, outreach specialists, to train people in trauma-informed care best practices, to remove barriers to services. A lot of barriers for families to receiving services that help with treatment are not having childcare, not having transportation or services that are conveniently located. So helping to try and break down some of those barriers, expanding telehealth services within this trauma network, and really just providing anything that's needed to bolster those local tailored responses. And then of course, there are set-asides required, 25% to sub-grant to community-based organizations, the organizations that do that on the ground work, who are well connected to community, who can provide care that is culturally competent and relevant, gender specific, and that are really trusted to do the work. And the last thing I'll highlight is that, oftentimes when we have federal programs and grant funding, the people who are evaluating how well it's going, how useful it is, are on the federal level or at these agencies. And a really interesting and new model for evaluation that we've included here is a bottom-up approach to evaluation. So everyone who is involved in receiving services and distributing services are giving feedback to the federal government about how this is working, what they actually need, if it falls short, and then sharing that so we can improve the program from there. So the Congresswoman introduced this last Congress, and again, this Congress in partnership with Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney. And we're looking for any way possible to continue to advance this bill, whether it's through appropriations or things like that. But really excited about it, and I think it's really important, and it just sort of complements, I think, the work that you all are doing on a day-to-day, and hopefully, speaks to some of the needs and gaps, and at a minimum sort of furthers the conversation of how the role that the federal government can and should play in helping address these issues for children and families.
Thank you so much for that overview, Jen. We have a few minutes where if there are a few questions from folks that are listening, please come off mute. Feel free to ask, obviously one at a time. Well, I will start with, Monica.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So where are we at with this piece of legislation? Where does it sit now? Is it in committee? Like, do you see it coming to the floor at any point for consideration?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now it is with the Energy and Commerce Committee. And so in terms of our strategy, what we're looking to do is get more members on the Energy and Commerce Committee to co-sponsor it, because committees like to advance legislation that their own members are supportive of. So right now it's sitting in committee. And I think if there are any ways to sort of pull pieces apart and pass them separately, we're always looking for ways to do that. But in terms of a standalone vote, I don't have a necessarily have a timeline right now, but that's currently our strategy, is trying to engage other offices and raise awareness for this legislation.
And Jen, did you see the link that I sent you via email where we had like an easy take action for folks to reach out to their representative about Strong, asking for them to support it? And would that be an appropriate thing to share in the chat and ask folks to just reach out to their representative, or would you rather keep it to Energy and Commerce for the time being?
Yeah, if the bill speaks to you, I am not going to tell anyone, what to do with their free time. You already spend so many hours a day on your day job, but if you feel so moved to reach out to your own member of Congress, I think that any member can help move it along. I think getting the numbers up is always helpful. If your member of Congress happens to be on the Ways and Means, on the Energy and Commerce Committee, even better. But anything that we can do, to continue the drumbeat would be fantastic. And thanks so much for putting that together, Jesse.
Of course. So in the chat, there is a link that you can take easy action to reach out to your representative and support Strong Support. Recognize that you can edit the email content that exists, but it's just a general email. Feel free to put in some of your own information. Thanks, Jen. There's time for maybe, Dan.
Yeah, I was, the July 2019 hearing before the oversight hearing was the single most powerful hearing I've ever seen in my 50 years of working with Congress. It was just amazing. And thank your boss for being the inspiration for that. I was wondering whether there's any plans for the Oversight Committee to have additional hearings to help bring attention to the issue.
It's something we're talking about. I can definitely circle back based on what we hear, but one way or another, people are going to start to pay attention to people beyond some of like a smaller group of members who are well attuned to this issue already, including my boss. More people are going to become aware of this epidemic that's happening, across the country around mental health and the trauma. And so I think it's going to be very relevant, and it's something that we are certainly pushing for. As I mentioned, and I put in the chat, the Congressman wrote a letter to the Biden administration when he was first, in his first 90 days. And she made a number of requests of the administration. One was to hold a White House summit on childhood trauma, combating community trauma. We're continuing to try and, get them to do that and engage in conversation. But we also elevated some of the appropriations requests that we were hearing from advocates and community and receive feedback from. And so, really excited that, to share that we are working on the appropriations bills now. We're doing votes on them next week in the House. But we received a lot of funding on the things that the Congresswoman was advocating for, like the CDC's Injury Center, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, just a record high amount of funding for those things. So we are seeing, some of that advocacy that we do in partnership with you all, sort of paying off, at least in Biden's budget. We had sort of advocated for a trauma-informed budget. And so we're encouraged by what we're seeing there, and we'll continue to, whether it's hearings or additional letters or whatever else we can do, happy to have additional letters and always partner with you all to elevate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. We're available to help in any way you can. Again, that first hearing has left an indelible impression on me, and hopefully on the Congress people who were in the room.
Thank you.
Jesse?
Jen, just thank you for joining. We look forward to continuing to partner together, to what Dan was saying, working toward that White House summit and anything else that comes to your mind. We just appreciate the partnership with you and the Congresswoman very much. And thank you for joining the CTIPP CAN call. As far as I know, you're the first congressional staffer to ever join a CTIPP CAN call and present on a specific piece of policy. So thank you for that as well.
Well, thank you for giving me, a platform to nerd out a little bit. And just on behalf of the Congresswoman, thank you all for all the work that you do to make all this possible. And I'll, drop my email in the chat, and I'm always available if anyone wants to talk further.
Yeah. Anytime you want to nerd out about trauma, we are your people. We are always here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Have a great rest of your day. Dan, do you want to take it away and go into a little bit?
Want to talk about other legislation, or
you want to go into RISE before we head into Rebecca and Sanghoon?
Well, why don't let's head right into it. Or why don't you quickly talk about RISE and rescue?
So the American Rescue Plan Act, we have been harping on for several months now. There is still time to mobilize around the various buckets of funding that exist in states and communities. And so if you have not heard us discuss that yet, so that way I don't take up time here, I will put a webinar that we did in the chat that you can find out more information about all of that, as well as talking points and a summary of the American Rescue Plan Act. There is massive opportunity to mobilize funds in communities to develop trauma-informed, resilience-focused, and healing-centered approaches, practices, environments, and systems. And then for those of you who are not on my listserv, for those of you who are on my listserv, thank you for dealing with the tremendous number of emails about the Rise from Trauma Act that have been coming from us for the last week and a half or so. The Rise from Trauma Act, similarly to the Strong Support for Children's Act, is another huge momentous piece of legislation that is currently moving through the Senate to gain support for trauma-informed care across the country. Most excitingly, Section 101 of the Rise from Trauma Act would create, it currently authorizes $600 million per year for 8 years, so $4.8 billion total, to fund local trauma coordinating bodies, which would provide communities with the funding to create their own trauma-informed, resilience-focused, and healing-centered systems to address community needs. To what Jen was saying, it coming from communities would allow for it to be culturally appropriate, culturally responsive, and really be driven by the community. And so you all have it. Similarly to the link that I put in the chat with when Jen was speaking about quick action to support the Strong Support for Children's Act, there is another quick action button that you all can read or fill in the information for, and then send quick messages to your senators, whether email or tweet, to co-sponsor the Rise from Trauma Act. Right now, it is a bipartisan bill co-sponsored by Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois, and who's a Democrat, Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia, who's a Republican, Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, who is a Republican, and Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, who is a Democrat. And we want to continue to push that trauma is a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue, really, and that it affects all people, regardless of how, their political stance. It impacts the issues that they care most about. And this is another great opportunity to really promote that. So we ask that you take action. Again, in my follow-up email from the CTIPP CAN call, all of this information will be there. I know that was a little bit of an information dump because we want to create as much time for Rebecca and Sanghoon as possible. And so I will put my email in the chat if you have any questions. If you want to do personalized outreach to your Senate staff, feel free to let me know and I can give you form language and an email for your senator. And don't hesitate to reach out if you are not currently on the CTIPP CAN listserv. I can add you to that as well. With all of that, Dan, I will turn it back over to you to introduce our first speaker.
Sure. Actually, before I do that, one other resource that we want to point out to you is the news announced the $26 billion settlement of the opioid lawsuits. That means $26 billion is going to be going to state and local communities. There's going to be a lot of effort to put all that money into treatment, but we know that treatment isn't going to end the epidemic. We need to do prevention and we need to do mitigation. So you need to start talking to your local officials and your state officials about putting some of that opiate settlement money into trauma-informed programs that we know can mitigate the effects of early childhood trauma or even prevent early trauma. If we don't go upstream, the epidemic of opioid use will be with us forever. So a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, nobody's really busy, are they? We know how busy you are, so we appreciate anything you can do on any of these issues. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Sanghoon Yoo, is the founder of Faithful City and the Arizona Trauma-Informed Faith Community. He's on the board of the Arizona ACEs Consortium. He's been a pioneer in bringing trauma-informed approaches to a community that we too often don't pay enough attention to, the faith-based community. He's also somebody with a huge heart who's become an advisor and a friend to me. So I'm really, really honored to introduce Sanghoon and look forward to listening to your presentation.
Thank you, Dan and Jesse and everyone here. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone from here in Arizona. Dan, I have how many minutes we talked about? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Dan's muted, but if you want to do 20 to 25 minutes, you have up to a half hour, but if we can keep it to 20 to 25, that would leave time for questions and answers at the end.
Yeah, so Jesse, just to stop me, I'm part of my job is a pastor, actually full-time. So once I start to talk, I never end. So that's my problem. So you guys jump on me, hey, saying stop there. So I can do that. I will share my slides with you guys. Okay, Jesse, you can see it? Ready? Okay, all right, good. Don't have much time, but welcome everyone. And this is, I founded my ministry at ASU, Arizona State University. And this is, ASU has an amazing social emotional learning section, kind of a department and organization, and Stand for the Harmony. And so I just gonna show you this because this is my kind of commitment to the movement. And then what I do all the time, wherever I go, first of all, I say, if you are traumatized by church or other faith community, I'm here to say, I apologize to you on behalf of those people, including myself, because to me, this is a movement of humanism and it's a movement of reconciliation. And there are a lot of huge gap between faith community and other sectors. And also, I'm gonna talk a lot about my more stories and pictures. I'm not a data guy, I'm not a policy guy. I don't know why I'm here, just Dan called me to come. But I wanna see how the process works because you know, if you work on qualitative research, that the process is important with a lot of stories. So I just want to share with you about stories what I have been done in God's grace and with amazing community national leaders together working together. So I show this because I always check the emotionally where people are kind of very frustrated and annoyed or tired, alienated, or vital and joyful, or calm and blessed. So usually I use this as kind of a checking on point. And then also after that, I do certain type of starting with mindfulness and exercise. Again, this is my commitment and then lifestyle, because the movement to me is a lifestyle commitment. So I'm not doing it just to present or show off or brag, but actually I'm very nervous doing this all the time because you guys are kind of expert on this. But as a commitment, to the movement, I do this. So if you don't mind, just feel free to have your comfortable posture and just checking out and sense that where you are. And because mindfulness is all about being here at the present moment. So I just want you to think about your feeling as we did, and thoughts, and your body, and your space. And you are with amazing people, the community of love and passion and commitment for the trauma-informed care movement. Feeling safe here. Hopefully we can do a little bit gently, slowly, breathe in and breathe out. One more time, breathe in and breathe out. We're going to centering prayer 30 seconds. I'm sorry, 10 seconds. Just pick up one good word and one good image you want to concentrate and center your soul and mind and body all together. If it bothers you, you are triggered or activated, don't do anything. Just comfortably posture yourself and stay there. And I'm gonna count 10 for our centering. Let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All together again. Slowly, gently breathe in the good word to myself and breathe out. Okay, today I want to share my story, and I'm gonna talk about why faith community in our trauma-informed care movement, and introducing the Arizona Trauma-Informed Faith Community I founded, and how to connect to the faith community as we want to work together. So it's me, and I founded at the Facebook City at Arizona State University. So I was in social work field before that, about 10, 15 years. And then I turned around my path to be a pastor. And so I have dealing with a lot of young people from all nations, and they scatter out after graduating college. And I'm now connecting with them as global community. Because I've been working a long time, kind of 25 years, right? But because of my nature as a social worker and pursuing change, did a lot of work with the community. So try to build up servant leadership program and working with a lot of people out there with the police and fire, social workers, and a lot of community people. So we built a community inside the campus, but outside the campus to raise a servant leadership. And we were the first group to adopt the park, and the mayor celebrate us with a proclamation last year as it was the 10th anniversary. So we've been doing a lot of work, but also touching a lot of people who got traumatized in the downtown and Phoenix and everywhere, helping them and raising the young leaders with the brokenness. Out of all this, actually, I got kind of a, I don't know why, but the word down, and then I got into my own traumatic season. So 6 years ago, actually, out of all this, fortunately, we did a great job, but unfortunately, I got burned out, and then with my traumatic season, I was very suicidal. So I picked up somewhere in the trauma-informed kind of a website. Actually, I wasn't like this. My experience with all my death around me and myself burnt out, and I gave up everything. My relationship and ministry, and almost becoming suicidal. So I was there. But at that time, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, I went to DC, and I met the Kimberly Conkle from Health Department of Health and Human Services, and she was doing that trauma-informed congregation conference. It's a national conference. So I was invited, and I was kind of surprised, because I never thought mental health, social work, pastor, church, trauma, they cannot work together. But in this conference, it was happening. And so I was shocked, and I came back to Arizona. And then I met Marsha Stanton, who was one of the founders of Arizona ACEs Consortium, Adverse Childhood Experiences Consortium, about 15, 16 years ago. She was looking for the faith leader to the faith movement together. And so we joined together, and I became a part of the ACEs Consortium. Right now, I'm serving the consortium as a board member and the faith community leader, and all types of works that we are doing together. But out of all this, actually, I met so many wonderful people like Dan and Jesse and all you guys. And so I'm so grateful. If you are curious about the consortium, you can visit AZTIFC.org. You can see this as a statewide authority of ACEs movement, trauma-informed care movement in the state of Arizona. So after that time, and then I don't know, I really started to be recovered, because I renewed my relationship with my God. There are a couple of people just unconditionally loved me wherever I am, whatever I did. And then this trauma-informed care movement, all the trainings I got through, that applied to me first. So that really helped my recovery. And then I started a movement with a consortium as a part of faith leader. And then it's exponentially grew throughout the state. So I don't know, so far, I think last 5-6 years, more than hundreds of presentation and trainings. The email list went up to about 4,000, and to the locally, nationally, and every day is something going on, and movement continue to advance. So that's why I just kind of not well organized, because it just grew. It was speeded so fast. I need a several secretary and website to build and everybody, but there's no time to think about it even. So it was kind of an interesting roller coaster journey. And so with that, let me tell you a little bit about some rationale that why faith community in trauma-informed care community. Well, you know the Paper Tigers, the movie, and then the principle there, and talk about the science from the trauma-informed care. And he said, one of the most important factors of the trauma recovery is unconditional love and one person with a constant care. When I heard that, I felt like, well, that's not medical term or behavioral health jargon. That's my language. That's what I am doing every day as a practice. So I felt like, wow, there must be a certain portion that faith and faith community can contribute to the movement. So again, after the conference in DC, I just find more and more that faith and science is merging together in this movement. So this is my testimony. This is my passion, and with this movement, I'm not losing my faith. I'm more deepen my faith. And with this movement, I have amazing knowledge that's coming together with our faith principle. So that was the key phrase that came to my heart deeply. And with the Governor's Office of Youth and Faith and Family in the state of Arizona, they funded the ACEs Consortium to build some training module for the substance use prevention coalitions in the state of Arizona. And I took a portion there, how the coalitions can working together with the faith community. So I will introduce a little bit of that. Why faith community in trauma-informed care community or for collaboration? Well, faith community has a relationship, has a lot of relationships with diverse communities. You can see that so many diversified communities in faith community. And especially if you work with marginalized or minority and oppressed work group, they are very, very attached to the faith community. And for the immigrants and refugees, the faith community is very, very well attached and very key part of the community. So this is not just about the spirituality, more than that. This is very, very important. And faith community can provide the long-term support in relationships. And I worked with a lot of people and social service and fire and police, but the systematically what we face as a challenge is that there are not many community that can provide the long-term support. But the faith community, honestly, it's hard to penetrate the wall between the faith community and other sectors because a lot of trust issue. But once we got into the faith community, they are, many of them are very committed to the long-term support and relationship, which is very important for our trauma recovery. And also a lot of faith community has already have a lot of programs and activities and safety resources. So where I can send my kids with a trust, right? And as you know, a lot of anonymous groups and self-help groups and peer support groups nationwide, they are using the faith community space and working together. Secondly, if you are in the trauma-informed care, as I did my exemplary kind of practice, mindfulness movement is one of the key. I mean, even secular and faith community, I mean, everywhere, business, government, I hear too much about the mindfulness. At the same time, I also noticed some resistance from certain faith community. I'm Christian pastor, so some Christians actually, I'm gonna be very honest here today, that very kind of resistant against all this kind of movement because they think, oh, it's from the Eastern religion and all types of misunderstanding. I am certified with the mindfulness and the ASU Mindfulness Center, but it's not about the religion, but actually also if you look into the mindfulness, actually deep down the root of all these spiritual principles comes out of the religions, religious traditions. I just did a deep breathing and you see that here that reverence, it is the paper reverence I use on the desk in the training because we can go monastery and do the walk around the reverence. But you know, if you look at all the principles deep down in the religious principles, actually it shows what we are trying to practice nowadays about the mindfulness, compassion, self-forgiving and love, and all this and emptying myself is actually from our religious root. So actually we can be a good friend and and collaborator, you know. And also we teach also about, I know people don't like the word trauma. So even among us, we talk about, do we use the trauma or not? So I think the best, most popular word people are using nowadays is the resilience. And actually, as a curriculum of a trauma-informed care training, resilience is really key and a big part. But when we teach the resilience, right, we talk about the post-traumatic growth. And in the post-traumatic growth, one of the most important thing is actually meaning creation. Okay, so I just have a Nietzsche's quote here. Actually, he is not that much a big favor in the religion, but he said, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. So, which means if you know the purpose of your life, you can handle all the process, ups and downs in your life. And where can you find this strong resource for this type of the purpose of life? That's what faith provides. Faith community can provide, and that a strong resource for the post-traumatic growth. And also for the resiliency, especially cultural and community resiliency, building identity and affirmation is very important. So affirming belief and cultural traditions are very, very key to build the resiliency. Because of our national tragic unrest, I had to work with my colleagues to teach a lot about the historical trauma, racial trauma last 13 months. And it's very important to honor their belief in cultural traditions, and then faith, community, and spirituality and plays a big part to really empower and build the identity and affirmation. So so far I talked about with my story, how much the movement helped me, also how much the faith community can contribute to the movement. And with that, I founded the Arizona Trauma Informed Faith Community. So I'm gonna introduce a little bit about that. Our mission is building resilient faith-based organizations as trauma-informed community to facilitate a sensitive care, training, resource sharing, advocacy, and social movement. Not compromising on faith tradition, but multiplying collaboration in the community for the greater good. So with that movement, we have tracks, organizational development, and regional leadership development. Now you are watching, you are looking at that Resilient Church Conference. I'm working with the Pure Heart Church for that as a venue, and with the Pastor Dan Stephan and Brenda Cochran. She is counseling director, and we created and founded this Resilient Church Conference. And with you can see the keynote speakers. This year we skipped it, but we're gonna resume next year. And these speakers, mainly the speakers about 2018. I picked that up because you see there's some familiar faces here. Hey, Becky Haas. So I invite Becky and Andy for our regional conference. And actually in our region, we have a core group of 50 leaders for this movement. And many of them are actually national, international figure. So this conference is kind of a gathering time of all movement, the members and contributors and participants coming together. But we go on from there. Well, this is kind of a part of pictures of the conference. Actually, this picture here is that there was a national mental health conference, National Muslim Mental Health Conference in Tempe, Arizona. So Marsha and I was presenting about the ACEs in that Muslim National Muslim Mental Health Conference. So I don't know why I'm kind of sort of right now, but we had a great time with all the Muslim the social service workers and mental health providers from whole nations. So the movement goes on beyond my own tradition and working together. And I talked about the regional development. So for our regional development, we started with a kind of 4 or 5 people in small refugee cafe, 6 years ago, and working together. Yeah, who can come to our movement? But now we have a monthly regional gathering in Phoenix and West and East and Central, South and Central North, and Phoenix North area, and also Tucson. Tucson is the second largest city in the state of Arizona. So we have a Resilient Church Conference, but Tucson has their own local conference, and also each region developing their own way of that community involvement with the faith community, and also working together with other sectors in their own region to develop our trauma-informed community movement. So this is the pictures of all the regions and how we gathered, and then some big days, big gathering. They have their own conference, their own workshops, but it's monthly going on, even through the pandemic. And I talk about also the tracks. So track development is that this is a kind of a not regional, but it's a professional or people group wise. So these tracks is about 12 or 13 tracks. So we have faith leaders in each tracks. So they are trauma-informed professional and they have faith. And so they become a leader of our trauma-informed faith-based care movement in the state of Arizona through AZTIFC. So each tracks are represented in our annual conference, but also we do the annual continued relationship building, and we try to working together, collaborate in each sectors. So let me show you a couple of examples on that. For example, you saw that the ACEs Consortium, so you know that well already, so I'm gonna skip that, and I contributed faith-based the sections in the consortium, and with the training of trainers and offering together. And there is a spiritual formation society of Arizona. So with the whole society and our AZTIFC, we working together, have a joint workshop for spiritual directors gathering reset or trauma-informed spiritual care. So annually, we do our joint workshop together as a collaboration. There is Arizona Coalition for the Veterans and Families. And we work together, so they are leader in our movement for the veterans and moral injury track, but also I participated with them and we made a joint training. Be Connected is a nationally renowned training course from our Arizona Coalition of Veterans Families. And then we made a trauma-informed navigator training. So I trained together. So their navigator training have a trauma-informed person as a faith-based movement, part of faith-based movement. So a lot of faith-based and faith-related community came together to help our veterans, and also veterans come together to understand, wow, there are faith community, we can work together. And also with the organizations, I just trained all the organizations and with the trauma-informed journey for 3 years. So this is a Hope Women's Center. I've been training for them. So I have several organizations, the churches and schools, mental health organizations, to train them to be a trauma-informed organization with a 3 to 4 years of journey. So out of all these things, we try to cover 12 sectors of engagement. We are one of them as a faith community, but also the most important thing is we need to bridge it together. This is a movement, not about talking about expertise, but we share our expertise so we can work together. So that's how we work together with our faith community and all other sectors. I'm gonna just talk about the last thing because I'm gonna skip all the great pictures and great stories. But the one thing is that I want to share before I go is that how to connect with the faith community. There are 5 steps here, right? So, and find the refer a person or community. Yes, of course, you can check it out in your local area. And first, building relationship. You know, one of my favorite social service workers working together, he always come to the church and our faith community says, how can I help you? Instead of, hey, there's a great program, I wanna tell you, you should do it. Instead of that, try to build a relationship as a servant leadership. And then there's an invitation to each other. And then we do always keyword, mutual help. And then build a project or collaboration. The reason I'm showing you this is that we always try to start from the project or collaboration. No. There are 3 steps, which is more important is a building relationship, especially as I said, trust is a big issue and a big portion in faith community. So I say, with working with the faith community, do this. Take a long enough time to build a relationship with a trust. Seriously. And second, and listen to the faith community to know them better. Okay, so they have their own stories. So it's very important to listen and then give away available resources and references to support them. I know a lot of us have great resources and don't mind to just giving them away. All the resources have a lot of sectors have. And don't hurry to make a huge progress in building a relationship and developing interest, which means there are gonna be ups and downs, but the more you just hang on there, and 1 year, 2 years, then they're gonna be trust gonna build, which is a major source for connecting together. So don't hurry with your own kind of a scale of time, because I know we have a lot of crunch the time because grant funding, scale, all the things, but don't hurry. And don't bring your own theology or faith tradition to persuade the community. Don't think, if you talk about God with some faith leaders, they're gonna be fascinated. It's not like that. Don't bring your own theology. You are expertise in so many places, and you just try to mutual helping each other. So don't bring your theology and tradition. Instead, just genuinely human, as a human. How can I help you? How can we work together? How can we be friends together? That's very important. And give the impression that, don't give the impression that you just want to use their resources. As a faith leader, we have a lot of problems, but also sometimes people come to us just to use us, government and all other sectors, to be honest. And so let's be honest and let's be together. So we are not here to use each other. We are here to mutually help and grow together. So I just want to say this is very important, that as a kind of a reminder all the time when we work with the faith community. So this is our trauma-informed community journey model. So we start with the awareness, and then we focus on the resilience and self-care of service providers and changing the organizational culture and then community engagement. So people who are in very core with our movement, they start talking about their own self-care and resilience. So I'm saying this again because we always think about what can I do together? What is the project? How can we engage? Before that, look at myself, how I deal with myself, gotta be role model, how I'm gonna help others. So that's the principle. And then we work together for that. So awareness, resilience and self-care, organizational culture, and community engagement. So yeah, sorry, I might the overtime. I don't know, nobody shout to me, so I just went on and on. So yeah, with the last thing is that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and save the crushed in the spirit. This is my scripture, but because when we are in trouble, people think God is away, you did something wrong because of God, punish you. But actually, I found with my trauma that He is near to me. So that gave me the hope. And then here I am 6 years later and presenting to you what we can do together. Thank you.
Sanghoon, that was perfect. Thank you so much for your compassion, empathy, your faith, the presentation itself, and certainly the love that you carried forth in everything that you do. We hope that you're able to stick around. There were a good amount of questions that came into the chat that we will get to after our next presenter, and I promise you, you did not go too far over time. So thank you very much. The next presentation will be from Rebecca Lewis-Pankratz, who is the director of the resilience team at AZTEC, and as powerfully has a powerful personal story and is a dynamic speaker. And so Rebecca, I will turn it over to you to share with the group.
Oh, Sanghoon, I'm still kind of sitting here just processing so many things that you brought today. And I was thinking, the adversity that you experienced and the conference that you found yourself at, thinking, why am I going to this conference, right? And it all has a purpose. And I think many of us here today might have found ourselves in this movement kind of by accident, right? Where you have this moment where you're like, whoa, yeah. And so that's my story too. Jesse and Dan and Sanghoon, it's just a really big deal that I got invited here to hang out with you guys. I'll share some slides, and just like Sanghoon, we'll give you links to these slides afterwards. You can have them, do whatever you want with them. We'll just kind of go through. My story is probably the most incredible tool I have. For most of my life, it didn't seem like a gift. It seemed like heaven was coming and it was going to, and once I got there, everything was going to be better, but life was going to be pretty difficult. That was kind of what I knew as a kiddo. And so again, I'll share this stuff with you. These women here are the reason that I get up every day and am able to push through some of the heavy stuff you talked about, Sanghoon. Resilience, I kind of caught it floating through in the chat. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And if you guys spend any time in public education, you got to be really crystal clear with folks, because resilience tends to come off as this idea of muster, right? If you just muster it up, right, you got to bounce back. And someone kind of said that it can be a very triggering word for folks that are trying to recover, or, you know, the fact that some of our kids and families are still alive is profound proof of resilience. And so for us, with Harvard Institute stuff, we really kind of coined this phrase: resilience is, I see you, I hear you, I'm with you. It's an external experience that helps people survive, right? And so, and the reason that this is such a important word to me is because it's a huge part of my story. Little kid, lots of trauma, right? Born in California to a single mom trying to figure it out, addiction, chaos, drugs, a lot of stuff going on. Had this amazing grandma though, and she brought us to Kansas. And then I got these grade school teachers, and those years of my childhood, there was still a lot going on, but my teachers and my grandma really stand out for me. They shaped a lot of who I turned out to later be. As with most kids, middle school showed up in my life and everything fell apart. I lost those grade school teachers and decided that my number one job was to keep teachers from teaching. And so fought with the girls from across town after I tried to be friends with them, realized that if I physically started fighting in the building, I could buy space, right? So it didn't take very long before I became that kid in the building. You know, the work I do now, looking back on all of this, what I couldn't say as a kid was, hey, I'm ashamed, I'm scared, I'm lonely, and I need you. That's not what people would have taken away from my behavior, but that's what was happening. High school comes, I'm just getting better at being that kid, right? Called the high school secretary on my 16th birthday and said, hey, guess what? I'm quitting. And the high school secretary was like, good, right? And so in my mind, I was going to take all of my brilliance and I was going to go out into the world and find a house like girls had that lived on the other side of town. 3 months before I turned 16, I fell madly in love with someone that was 3 years older than me and fresh out of the penitentiary. And so on my 16th birthday, we left state and I didn't call or come home for 3.5 years. And you guys know what I found. I did not find a house like girls had on the other side of town. I found survival, right? Very quickly, I realized this is always about the lights and the rent and gas for a car if there is a car. My soon-to-be husband and I started partying, and pretty soon partying turned into addictions, and addictions turned into a 13-year-long marriage of profound and incredible abuse. Domestic violence cycle. I've sat down and tried to count how many times I left and went back, how many times I went into hiding and went back. It's over 50 in 13 years. 29 years old, I finally felt like I had permission from God to actually leave my marriage and stay gone, and the courage to do so. I found myself homeless, no job, no car, no money, all this trauma, and pregnant with my first baby. So too little and I knew when I got pregnant, I was like, I got to do something different than what was done for me. And so I enrolled in college full-time to be a teacher. I went back to work full-time. And when I had my baby, he cried full-time, right? Fast forward almost a decade later, 2 more little boys, 2 more failed relationships, 2 little boys later. So I have 3 at this point. I'm in a trailer house that I bought for $1,000. It should have been condemned. Holes in the floor, windows broke out, right? And it was either that or homelessness with 3 kids. And so I'm 7 months clean and sober, working nights at a bar. in college full-time, trying to get a degree to be a high school art teacher. And my oldest son and my youngest son were like, climb the walls wild. Somebody said, hey, you got a babe, if you go to this church, they'll give you free diapers. So Sanghoon, I showed up at the church, right? What do I got to do for these diapers? Nothing, just come in, we'll give them to you. A lady there built a relationship with me. And long story short, out of this debt that I felt like I owed her, she kind of invited me to this poverty project, right? I'm like, and I'm thinking, I'm already doing everything. I'm in college full-time, I'm working full-time. Like, why do I need to go to this process, right? Sanghoon, why do I need to go to this conference? But I felt like I owed her a debt. She's like, oh yeah, you come once a week, there's a family style meal. All the kids go to childcare. There's all these middle-class people there for support. And I'm like, that sounds flipping horrifying to me, right? But I showed up that night and I had 3 little boys. Addiction's not far from my background. We lived in a place that if people found out we lived there, they would take my children. Said a prayer, pushed through that gymnasium door, right? Walked in, 60 people, these what I considered powerful looking middle-class women came over and just scooped up my little boys. And they took me and about 8 other parents and they said, come on, come this way. And they sat us down and they said, look, here's the deal. We see families struggling in our county and we think the root cause of that is poverty and we want to solve it. And we need people like you who are living it to tell us what to do. So instantly they disarmed me and they empowered me. All kinds of amazing things happened for me, like just mindset shift after mindset shift and love. And, you know, I see you, I hear you, we're with you, Rebecca. And my people weren't judged. We were elevated as the way out. We were going to spend time with people that had resources and they were going to listen to us and help us build pathways out of poverty for ourselves and those we love, right? So we were doing trauma-informed stuff before we recognized that's what it was. All kinds of stuff happened, but they helped me clean up the 17 incompletes I had and get a degree. I went to work for that organization. We built it into the largest, most successful poverty project like that in the country, getting more families completely out of generational poverty than any other project had ever done. Somewhere around in there too, I became the diaper lady. So I got to be the outreach coordinator at that church. So all these kind of cool things happen, Sanghoon, where like, you know, at some point you look back and you're like, okay, God, it all makes sense now. I needed all this stuff to happen to get me here, right? So my kids, right? I told you guys, my kids were kind of, my oldest and youngest, they were like climb the walls wild kids. They were all in the same elementary building at the same time. And my kids were the kids that were taking over the building, flipping desks, running out of classrooms, right? Amazing teachers that were like, we don't know what this is. But anyways, so as I transformed, the teachers were watching my kids transform right before their eyes. And they also began to recognize that I was kind of like bilingual, right? I could translate middle class and poverty back and forth. And so at some point, this organization, AZTEC, found me to start doing consulting. In 2017, they asked me to come on full time and become the director over their high school dropout completion programs. And I said, I will do that if you let me build poverty projects out of these centers. And so I met a best friend at 40 something years old. She was the CEO of a youth ministry in a little tiny town in Kansas called Greensburg. And she had been doing youth ministry for unchurched kids for 20 years. And she said, you know, in the beginning, Sanghoon, and this might ring true for you, there was this idea when she was this young, white, middle-class girl in rural Kansas that if you just give them Jesus, their whole lives are going to change. And she reached out to me and she said, we're 20 years on the other side of this deal. And I know these kids have a deep faith concept and I'm watching them grow up and repeat the cycle. What am I missing? And so I helped her build a poverty project. And then when I left the one in McPherson and went to work for AZTEC, their board was wanting to expand. You guys know the deal. Like, I'm like, where do you guys want to expand to? And she's like, in these counties. I'm like, those are the same counties I have learning centers in. And so since 2017, we have gotten 11 of these projects off the ground, which is unheard of. It's hard, heavy lifting stuff. And we've got a project in Illinois, and I feel like God has positioned us to scale all over the country, because what we're doing is we're bringing families in for a 2 to 5 year process, usually hosted in a church, Sanghoon. Faith is not a part of our process, but people can bring their faith. But we also want all types of humans to come and be with us and celebrate their different beliefs, their different ideas, and build true community. And I loved what you said, Jesse, about this is not a left or a right issue, because we have to stop doing that, right? We've got to come together and understand we all experience trauma. Nobody got out of childhood for free. And that we all need hope and healing, and that is done through relationships and community building, right? And for me, it is a part of my faith-based story. Like Sanghoon, you kind of said it, but I was like, oh yeah, right? Jesus was the first trauma-informed guru. I mean, he was talking all this stuff a long time ago, right? So we are getting families completely out of financial poverty. And again, I'll share these slides with you. It's a simple process. We engage families for 20 weeks. We win them over to us and ask them to stay on for an 18-month commitment, where we have prepared middle-class people to walk alongside of them as friends, not mentors, friends. The middle class have as much to learn from our families as our families need their support, right? The strange thing about these projects is the middle class are craving healing. They just can't say it. They don't know it. They come in here and they're like, holy smokes, right? We're in this process for 2 to 5 years. And a lot of our families get stable enough, they turn around and they walk alongside of other families. It is really important to me that we are developing trauma-informed parents, and that we are having our trauma-informed parents lead and guide other parents in their circle and their community, right? We have to get away from this idea that the entirety of healing rests in our kind of mental health models. Desperately need more mental health, but mental health takes time. And so I just kind of want to walk you guys through something that we're rolling out with all of our families. But one of the parts to our experiential trauma work that we do with parents is this idea of the river of cruelty. And when you think about, a river has a source and it flows, right? And it gets to the ocean. And what does it do when it gets to the ocean? I don't know the fancy name for it, but it like comes back up in the air and goes back down, right? So it's a cycle. So is cruelty. And you kind of think about cruel things that happen to kids. And so I'm going to escape out of here. Somebody in the chat, just give me a couple of cruel things that happen to kids. Just throw it in the chat. What are some cruel things that can happen to a kid? Neglect. Thanks. Yeah, physical, sexual abuse, bullying. Okay, so when you think about some of these experiences that people have as children, or that children are having right now, what are some of the adverse feelings that are experienced because of being thrown into the river of cruelty? Like, what are some of the emotions that people experience from this stuff? Shame, thanks. Sadness, anger, rage, right? Isolation, loneliness. You guys, right? These are adverse feelings of the world. And at some point with our kids, we don't have guides. And America has been said by Bessel van der Kolk that we are the most disembodied culture in the world, right? We don't want to acknowledge all this stuff. We just want to know how to get up into the prefrontal cortex and make all of our decisions, right? We want to get all this stuff offline and get up here. And we're not taught how to understand that our spirit, our feelings, our body, and our thoughts and our actions are all connected. So here are adverse feelings, right? At some point, kids are taught to act happy when they're sad and ticked off when they're afraid. And so the reality is, though, is if we don't have any guides kind of helping our kids process through this stuff, that these emotional loads have to be managed, right? And so human beings build defense systems to not have to feel their feelings. So when you think about some defense systems that humans build, give me a couple of those. And I'll just kind of tell you, in a school system, it's flip a desk, right? I'm scared because you don't love me, teacher. I feel this way that I felt like 8 days ago at home. I'm gonna flip a desk and now you're scared. I just handed those feelings to you, right? Disassociate, thanks. I never can spell that. Anyways, you guys are just gonna forgive me. Medicate, right? And so get drunk as I can, get high as I can. Riots, right? When you have too big of emotional loads, we will see human beings use riots as a defense system. They can't take it anymore. Put on a facade, thanks. And so it's important that we don't judge defense systems. Defense systems are important to people surviving in the river, right? The problem is that human beings, we tend to hang on to our defense systems even after we're out of the river, right? And so, and that creates consequences for us, right? And so, I'll just kind of follow this out for you guys. Depression, alcoholism, anxiety, bankruptcy, divorce, job loss. The river gives us beliefs and attitudes. We develop these beliefs and attitudes in the river. Some are about society, they're generalized, and some are about us. And so examples of societal beliefs, right? Families in poverty are lazy. What are some other ones? Women are too emotional. Kids these days are lazy, right? Bad parenting. Hopeless. It's hopeless. It's a hopeless situation. Why are we even trying, right? That's a belief and an attitude you'll hear. You'll hear it in your, they just have victim mentality. Yep. We don't want to feed into that, right? Oh, you guys are doing good. Abuse is inevitable. Okay, so what are some beliefs about ourselves that we can develop after spending time in the river, right? Stupid. White people are superior. Oh yeah, that's gonna are superior. Thanks. Yes, I deserve this, right? Okay, you guys got it. Unlovable. Why try? I always lose. Like those are belief systems that get imprinted into us from this river. Here's what I want to talk to you guys about. That's the kicker. So for me, right, you guys ever hear this idea that families that are experiencing a lot of adversity, what do we tell our kids before we send them to school? Don't tell those teachers what's happening at home because they will take you from me, right? And people judge that. Well, that's survival-based parenting. I got a good reason to tell my kids not to tell the middle-class people stuff, right? Because I don't think middle-class people understand that families in poverty live with this bone-crushing weight of every day somebody could come in and take my kids, right? That's incredible. But for me, in the trailer park, with my people, who will always be my people, I looked around, I knew the boys typically go to prison and the girls get pregnant young. And that I got to teach my kids what? What's the belief system? I have to teach my boys to be tough. Friends, right here, this belief system is what gives me permission to throw my kids in the river. And the cycle continues. These kids are lazy these days is what gives us permission to throw that kid in the river in a school system, right? Think about, societies, however. So helping our families to kind of grapple with this and then really go after some of the deep belief systems that are here and feel the energy that is stored in their body from a long time ago, from when they got that belief system, and helping our parents to let go of survival-based parenting, middle class included, because middle class do it, they just do it differently. And start to think about nurturing, safe. When you ask a parent, why do you want your kid to be tough? They'll say, well, because they need to be. They have to be in order to survive all this. And I'm like, do you want your kid to be tough or do you want him to be safe? And they're like, oh, I want him to be safe. Thanks. So let's build that, right? I work with schools. We build these poverty projects. So anyways, I've talked too long, Jesse. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to give you guys a link to this PowerPoint. You can do whatever you want with it.
Please definitely give the link to the PowerPoint, but do not shut up. You have not spoken too long.
I always feel like I've just talked too long. I'm like, oh, I need to stop talking. Somebody probably wants to jump in here.
I think that Once everybody in the world listens, that would be a good time. But until then, please don't stop. Thank you for the vulnerability of sharing your story. Truly, absolutely incredible. I recognize I jumped in. So with me jumping in, I will hand it back to you. Are there any concluding thoughts before we head into Q&A that you want to share?
Yeah. I love, Sanghoon, what you're doing, because the reality is that we have to build a longer table. We got to figure out who's missing from the table. There are a ton of Rebeccas running around in your towns. There are a ton of folks. When we create the right environments, the lived experience guides us forward and it helps us stay due north. And so I just am really honored, and our kids in our schools, right? Because there's a lot of behaviorism. And I think a new way that we're starting to talk about behaviorism, I just always use that, right? Behaviorism says, if you do something, it's because you chose to do it, therefore, right? It comes from, I mean, we've been dealing with this science of behaviorism for 50, 60, 70 years. But I also started to kind of unpack, oh, wow, this has roots in white supremacy, right? And so wrestling with this stuff, and trauma-informed work really requires us to focus internally on our own organizations, our own systems, our own communities, our own families, and start the work there, right? And never stop, because this human condition we have, it's tough. We are pretty familiar with the river. And so we got a lot of work to do. But I just want to share with you that we can get people out of poverty. You know, with the project to make Ferguson that I was a part of, and the projects now that I'm a part of, we've gotten over 100 families out of poverty in the last 8 years. And I have this sense, because of the exponential way things are happening now, by 2030, we'll have more than 1,000 families out. And when I say out, I mean financially they are out, and they have the positioning, the power, the skill sets, access to the doorknobs from the middle class. Like, they are changing not only the trajectory of their generation and their kids, but they're changing the communities in which they live in.
Powerful. It's powerful. And the fact that it comes through community and relationship rests on every principle of what the trauma-informed movement is pushing toward. You know, Dan and I and others, Rebecca, you certainly, and many, many others talk about how, you know, in this push that we are sort of undergoing as a nation to address poverty, there is a complete lack of appreciation for the trauma that exists in poverty. And it's not just a function of handouts. It's a function of hand ups, I think I've heard, and making sure that those relationships are in place to sustain that change over time. And the work that you do exemplifies that 100%.
And Jesse, there's a lot of power in the middle class too. And I think when you have power, it's really invisible to you, is what right? Like, people don't realize how much power they have. And, you know, when we've got these middle class systems that are awake to who our families are in their local communities, it's like you could recycle that job to a middle class human, or you could make sure that you're allowing some families that want to build a better life the opportunity to interview, right? And take some chances. And so understanding the power differential and stopping to blame families for the defense systems they build because of the oppressive systems that they're in, right? So,
and
yes.
Yeah. And I just want to recognize that, you know, when we talk about how to advocate and what advocacy should look like, a huge piece of it is sharing your story. And that is up to the individual what they want to share or not. We will never tell you what to share, but I just hope that, you know, what I'm reflecting on right now is the power that both you, Rebecca, and Sanghoon in your stories started with why the work that you do is so important to you, and opened up to share why that why matters so closely to your heart before you shared how and what and how powerful that is. And thank you for leading by example in that process, because that's something that we need for advocates to do around the country to really create this movement and really make it as big as possible. When we talk about the American Rescue Plan Act, when we talk about strong support for children, when we talk about the Rise from Trauma Act, and hopefully myriad other pieces of legislation and programs that are put in place to support communities around the country and around the world. that's how it's going to happen. And the community that you all are a part of to empower you to share that story is so huge. So thank you both. We have a number of questions that were put into the chat during the presentations. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat now. Once I'm done with these questions, we can just open it up to the floor for a bit. So the first one, which Rebecca, you certainly acknowledged, and Sanghoon, you may have as well, but can we share your contact information as well as slides with participants? Oh, Rebecca already shared the slides in the chat, so well ahead of the game. And there's Rebecca's email. And again, I will follow up in the email that we send out to the CTIPP CAN listserv with contact information and the slide decks as well, for whoever is willing to share. Sanghoon, for you, from Laurie, she said that appreciate this important sector being engaged, the faith-based communities. Thank you for acknowledging the trust issues. She appreciates the candor in realizing mindfulness as a term can be alienating. The question is wellness a preferred term? I believe that is in reference to comparing it to trauma.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Rebecca, thank you so much. I was so touched, and honestly, your story is part of a lot of stories, but it was so powerful at this moment. And you combine the stories and data and everything together is very, very, I was touched. Thank you so much. I have one more comment, I forgot, I'm sorry. My brain is kind of scattered right now. And when we talk about, the term, well, I just want to say this, I was dealing with the trauma 30 years ago, and I came back to this field, but people are talking the same thing still. Do we have to use the trauma? People don't like it. Well, Rebecca talked about, we are so much prefrontal cortex oriented, right? So we are more about the logos, the word, but actually our trauma-informed care movement really emphasize our pathos, our passion and heart, and our ethos, our being and our character. And, so I just wanted to say that we can talk about and discuss a lot about what is the right term to use, but from my experiences, there's no one term that can satisfy everybody. So when we went to the city of Phoenix, we talk about resilience. They said, oh, don't use that. In the city, we use that word for something else. What? That's the most popular word around the whole world, but they don't want to use resilience. Well-being is already taken by so many sectors. So I like that as the person questioned, I forgot the name, sorry, I apologize, said that yes, we need to define each time what is mindfulness. And when we define it, when we know what it is, we know what is not. So I think that's really good practice. So when you say well-being, instead of alternating it, what does it mean wellness when I talk with you right now? I think that's a better way how we're gonna use the word, because with this emerging movement, there are a lot of terms popping up, and people want to have the most satisfactory term, but I find at the same time it's failing. But I don't want to discourage you guys all. But most important thing is keep your heart, and when your heart vibrates to the audience and people and collaborators together, they will get it. They will get it. The term you are using, what you define as a resilience, well-being, wellness, all the things we love to use. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanghoon. And then the other question that I have for both of you is there content, what content are you using for trauma-informed organizations? You brought up the fact that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has a trauma-informed organizational assessment, but are you using that? Some other audit or screening tool? How do you determine if an organization or community is trauma-informed?
Rebecca, do you want to go ahead first?
Well, I think this is a really worthwhile question because the term, so I'll just tell you our take on kind of messing with this stuff with schools for a lot of years. The language trauma informed implies I know something, right? And so I would have administrators tell me, oh yeah, we're trauma informed. We had a lady come talk about ACEs once. And so the continuum that we use is trauma aware, which means you left some conference and you're like, holy smokes, there's trauma and maybe I have some, right? You're just kind of getting tuned in. A school, like teachers would be kind of, they got turned on to it. And then trauma sensitive, they're starting to see it play out in their classroom. And they are reading books and self-learning. Trauma responsive is where the entire building or organization has a foundational experience with understanding the basic science of trauma, the brain, the body, the stress response system, healing. And they've been tested for buy-in. So the school 75 to 80% bought in. We don't have schools say they're trauma informed until the science of trauma and resilience informs every decision they make, every interaction they have, every hire. They let people go in a trauma informed way, right? Like trauma informed, it just is who you are. It influences everything that you do, right? It influences the way you deal with the Uber guy. You are always trauma informed from this point forward. And so I don't know if that's helpful or not, to help people understand there is a progression to this. I know of very, very, very few trauma informed schools. I know a lot of trauma responsive schools that I'm working with, but very few that are truly trauma informed.
And
Can I say one thing?
absolutely, Sanghoon, please.
All right. Okay, so I don't know. I tried to put my PowerPoint. It doesn't work, so I'm gonna send it to the Jesse, and there's my contact information. And regarding the organizational tool, survey tool, I think our university group are working on that in our CTIPP2 here. But I use a couple of them, and I don't remember exactly. And we also have a environmental trauma scan we're using to measure the organization. One thing is following Rebecca, I just want to say this because survey itself gives a lot of triggering or activating. And with the pandemic, I work with the schools and school teachers are tired of surveying. So, and then also when we try to do this, I know we need it because we want to measure and all the things, system change, systematic kind of needs. But to me, this is a countercultural movement. And with that, we have to be very sensitive. I'm not against it, very sensitive when we do any type of a survey, because a survey can bring us, hinder our relationship. I emphasize building relationship most important. Connect before correct. That's what we hear from restorative justice movement. I always say also to everybody, connect before content. Our content information, very precious and powerful. However, we try to connect. If the survey is gonna be hindrance or triggering, activating, I just want to say, be careful and use accordingly in timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanghoon. So to both of you, follow-up question. Sanghoon, it sounds like what you do is very much baked into sort of the action behind Bruce Perry's 3 R's of regulate, relate, and reason, is what I heard there, which is beautiful, the way that you sort of orated how you live that into action.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail because I use that 3 R all the time.
Right?
Yeah, and the bottom up, and even, let me tell you, Rebecca talk about Jesus, I feel free to talk about Jesus. With a woman in the court adultery, John A, Jesus did, get rid of all the accusers, and then he said, I don't condemn you, and then sin no more. I totally use that to convince my faith leaders. Jesus put the safety first, regulate. And Jesus put that, I love you, not condemn you, relate. And then reason, sin no more. Typically, our churches, all organizations, to the top, to the bottom. Remember the rule and keep it, reason, and then you keep the rule, I love you, you belong, and then you are safe here. Our trauma informed the other way around, right? So we need to put the safety, regulate, emotional connection, relate, and reason. Yes, Bruce Perry is our guy, and we invite him as a national speaker when we did the annual summit of our consortium and the governor's office working together. So he was the main keynote speaker 2 years ago here.
That's beautiful. And then Rebecca, there's a question. Can you share the phases of the trauma-informed continuum? I want to give you space to do that again, but is it based on the Missouri model? As you were speaking it sounds like that's sort of the continuum that you all use.
Yeah, and I think Missouri actually got it from Tennessee. And so I don't want to, like, I've kind of tracked some stuff down. So and it doesn't matter. it's trauma aware to trauma sensitive to trauma responsive to trauma informed. And that is not an intuitive progression for folks. So if you get on our website, resilienceteam.asdec.org, you should be able to find a lot of this stuff on there. And there's some kind of clarifiers, and the language really speaks to schools, but take it. It's not ours. We don't own it. We got it. We stole it from other people, which is what I hope this movement has plenty of, right? You need it, take it, find it. But it's just a way to help people go, oh, when we show that to teachers, we go to schools all the time. They think they're trauma informed. And then we put that up there and they're like, oh, like we're still aware, right? And so it's just helpful for folks to go, yeah, this is where we are.
Mm-hmm. And I love the high bar that you have for what trauma informed means and looks like. And thank you, Alex, for sharing the PDF of the Missouri model in the chat. Very much appreciated. Are there any other questions from folks still on the call? Thank you all so much. If you have any questions, feel free to come off mute. I don't know, Rebecca and Sanghoon, what your time looks like. I'm happy to stick around for 10 or 15 more minutes if there are questions. If not, this was an awesome hour and a half.
I have a question. Do we have permission to share this recording? Because honestly, I've got to tell you, this is the first concrete example of ACEs aware and resilience that I've heard, and I just want to tell the world. I'm just so impressed and so touched, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Helen, that's so sweet. I will let Sanghoon and Rebecca both share with that as well. But all CTIPP CAN calls are public on YouTube, and we would love it if you shared this information to as many ears and eyes as you can possibly reach. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Helen, bless you. I felt that when you shared, I felt that with you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you may not see my teary eyes here. It's too far, right? But
Okay, don't start because there's going to be a waterfall.
I'm serious.
Thank you.
This is Beatrice Videz. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate both of your perspectives in working from the bottom up, but also looking at the top down. So when you talk about being trauma, to be trauma informed means to be that you need to be equitably just. And it is, I think, one of the pieces that makes it really hard to do this work when you're a person of color or when you're a person of a lower class. And what I appreciate about your work is that in the hierarchy of healing, it is very hard to deal with, let's say, neglect or abuse when you're hungry. And so I really appreciate that we're talking about concrete pieces that take care of equity, but also pieces that take care of the spirit that sometimes gets broken. So I really appreciate that perspective today, as that's mostly the work that I do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sanghoon.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Actually, in my training, I put both together. Bruce Perry's pyramid of a 3R, regular, related, reason, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, human needs. And if you look at these two pyramids, it goes together. I mean, people say Maslow before Bloom, but it really persuasive. At the same time, because I work a lot with the Black Brown community, and it's very, very important to get aware about the equity. And as we know well about the epigenetics and the historical trauma and all the things. And at the same time, from Native Americans, I heard it about 20 years ago at ASU. For them, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it should be upside down. And in a certain community, for them, who they are, their spiritual actualization is more important than the basic need. So I think there's so much diversity there and depth there. And I hope that we can kind of release our universal model, and instead we try to listen more. Our model, our trauma-informed care, is all about cultural humility versus cultural competence. We prefer cultural humility. I don't know you, but that's okay. we can learn from you. I'm sorry, we can learn from you. See, I'm crying. That's more important for us to have a really trauma-informed heart to present to the people.
Beatrice, I just hope that I get to know you, but Sanghoon, I'm texting my team right now. Cultural humility trumps, which that's not what you said, but humility more important than cultural competency. And we'll have to pull that apart and wrestle with that, because that is beautiful, right? When you just go to people and say, hey, what do you need us to know? And what do you need from us, right? And understanding that the people that are experiencing the issues that we're trying to solve have the answers. They have the answers. Ask them. We don't ever do that, Sanghoon. It's just like you said, we make decisions and we want to be super competent. Like what I figured out about middle class, I've hung out here long enough, is that people are like super addicted to achievement. Right. And I don't know. So that really sung to me.
Thank you both for the reflections, and thank you, Beatrice, for that comment question. I will leave space for anybody else with last questions, thoughts, comments.
I have a comment.
Go for it, James.
Rebecca and Sanghoon, it was an honor meeting you, and I will be reaching out. That's a guarantee.
James, I can't wait.
Okay.
Likewise. Thank you. Let's talk.
Well, thank you all for taking the time today. Rebecca, Sanghoon, this was absolutely an incredible CTIPP CAN call. So thank you for your participation and for all the work you do in your communities, and for the people that you work with and love. Everyone, thank you for being a part of the movement and continuing to help to build the movement. Take good care, be safe. We will have another call next month like we always do, and we hope to see you all then. But enjoy your summer. Don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you.
Oh, Jesse, I'll see you at 4.
I'll be here, James.
Okay.
Anytime.
Jesse, thank you too. And Sanghoon, I'm going to anxiously try and dig back through this chat. I saved it to try and find your contact info, because I know folks that want to spend time with you. They just don't know it yet. As soon as I tell them about you, they'll be like, yeah, like, let's do that. We need that. And so anyways.
Likewise. Thank you, Jesse, Rebecca, and Dan, and everybody. Thank you. I'm so honored to hear and blessed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanghoon. Thanks, Rebecca.
Have a good summer. And I'm not going to invite you here in the summer. You know where I am, but maybe in the winter.
Maybe in the winter.
See you there.
Yeah, you can come to Kansas. We're having a freak summer. So
sounds good.
All right.
Take good care.